What if the very first human walked past you tomorrow? Would you even recognize them? Most people are convinced they would. After all, we've all seen the familiar image. A shaggy caveman carrying a heavy wooden club, living in a dark cave somewhere deep in the wilderness. It's an image that has appeared in movies, books, and documentaries for generations. But here's the strange part. Almost everything we've been taught to imagine about our earliest ancestors is either incomplete, outdated, or simply wrong. And that's not just an opinion. It's what more than a century of archaeological discoveries has gradually revealed. So instead of repeating old assumptions, let's do something different. Let's investigate the evidence. Not just one famous fossil or one remarkable skeleton, but the clues that scientists have uncovered across Africa over decades of careful research. Ancient footprints preserved by volcanic ash. Stone tools abandoned millions of years ago. Animal bones marked by razor-sharp cuts. Fragments of skulls buried beneath layers of earth. Each discovery tells part of the story. None of them tells the whole story. Only when those clues are examined together does an entirely different picture begin to emerge. By the end of this investigation, you may discover that the biggest mystery was never what the first humans looked like. The real mystery was what made them human in the first place. And surprisingly, our first clue isn't a skull. It isn't a skeleton. It isn't even a human body. It's a single footprint. A footprint that should have disappeared within hours, but instead remained hidden for millions of years, waiting to be discovered. And that forgotten footprint may reveal more about the first humans than their faces ever could. Let's begin with that footprint. At first, it doesn't seem like much. After all, footprints are among the most temporary things in nature. A little rain washes them away. A strong wind erases them. Another animal steps over them, and within hours they're gone forever. So how could a footprint possibly survive for millions of years? The answer begins with an extraordinary coincidence. Around 3.6 million years ago, in what is now northern Tanzania, a nearby volcano spread a thin layer of fine volcanic ash across the landscape. It settled gently over the ground, creating a soft surface that captured every step like fresh snow. Sometime later, a small group of early human ancestors walked across that ash, leaving behind a trail of footprints. Then, before wind or rain could erase them, another layer of ash covered the tracks, sealing them beneath the surface. Over countless generations, those layers hardened into rock, preserving a single moment that nature should have erased forever. Millions of years later, archaeologists uncovered those footprints at a site called Laetoli. At first, the discovery was celebrated simply because the footprints were incredibly old. But as researchers studied them more carefully, they realized they had found something far more valuable than ancient tracks. Fossils can tell us what a body looked like. A footprint can tell us what that body was doing. It captures movement instead of anatomy. It preserves behavior instead of bone. For the first time, scientists weren't just reconstructing an ancient ancestor. They were watching an ordinary moment from a world that vanished millions of years ago. And that ordinary moment raised an extraordinary question. If a single trail of footprints could reveal how our ancestors moved across the landscape, what else might it reveal about the way they lived? At first, scientists asked the obvious questions. How old were the footprints? How tall was the individual who made them? How fast were they walking? Those questions were important, but they weren't the ones that changed our understanding of human evolution. The more researchers examined the trail, the more they realized they weren't simply looking at footprints. They were looking at decisions frozen in time. The spacing between each step suggested a calm, steady pace, rather than a desperate sprint. The impressions showed individuals walking upright, balancing their weight in a way that feels surprisingly familiar today. Even more intriguing, the footprints appeared to belong to more than one individual, traveling together across the same landscape. That observation may not sound extraordinary at first, but it marked a turning point in the investigation. A fossil tells us what a body looked like. A footprint tells us what that body was doing. For the first time, archaeologists could study behavior instead of anatomy. They could see movement instead of imagining it. They could begin asking not just who these ancestors were, but how they lived. Yet the footprints also revealed the limits of the evidence. They could show us where our ancestors walked, but not why they walked there. They could tell us they moved together, but not how they survived in a world filled with predators far stronger than themselves. And that's where the mystery became even more fascinating. If walking upright wasn't enough to explain humanity's success, then something else must have separated these early humans from every other animal sharing the African savanna. To find that answer, archaeologists had to stop looking at the ground beneath their feet and start looking at the objects they left behind. The next clue wasn't hidden in a fossil. It wasn't preserved in volcanic ash. It was scattered across the ground in plain sight. At first glance, the stones didn't look remarkable. They were small, broken, and easy to overlook. In fact, for centuries, people walked past objects like these without giving them a second thought. So why would archaeologists become excited over what appeared to be nothing more than ordinary rocks? Because they weren't studying the stones themselves. They were studying the marks left on them. Under close examination, researchers noticed something nature rarely produces. The edges weren't broken at random. They had been shaped by a series of deliberate strikes, each one removing a sharp flake from the stone with surprising precision. Even more remarkable, the same manufacturing patterns appeared again and again at different archaeological sites across Africa, despite being separated by vast distances and hundreds of thousands of years. That consistency couldn't be explained by chance. It pointed to repeated behavior, and repeated behavior points to intention. Suddenly, the investigation was no longer about rocks, it was about decisions. Somewhere in the distant past, one of our ancestors looked at an ordinary stone and imagined something that didn't exist yet. Not another rock, but a tool. That single moment may have been one of the most important mental shifts in human history, because every other predator depended on the weapons evolution had given them. Sharp teeth, powerful jaws, long claws. Early humans possessed none of those advantages. Instead, they created one. And that raises another fascinating question. If our ancestors could imagine a tool that nature had never made, how did that idea survive long enough to transform an entire species? By now, the evidence has taken us much farther than we expected. We began this investigation trying to answer a simple question. What did the first humans really look like? But somewhere along the way, the fossils, the footprints, and the stone tools led us to a completely different mystery. Appearance was never the defining feature of humanity. The evidence points to something much deeper. Footprints revealed that our ancestors moved through the world with purpose. Stone tools revealed that they could imagine possibilities hidden inside ordinary objects. And when those discoveries were passed from one generation to the next, something extraordinary began to happen. Knowledge no longer disappeared when an individual died. It accumulated. Every generation inherited a slightly better understanding of the world than the one before it. Over thousands of generations, those small improvements became an unstoppable force. They led to better tools, safer communities, more successful hunting, and eventually to agriculture, writing, science, and civilization itself. Looking back, it's tempting to believe that humanity's greatest advantage was a larger brain or a stronger body. Yet the evidence tells a different story. Our greatest advantage may have been the ability to preserve an idea, improve it, and share it with someone who had never seen the world before. Perhaps that was the first truly human act, not making a tool, but making sure the next generation didn't have to start from the beginning. And maybe that's why this investigation matters today. Every book we write, every lesson we teach, every discovery we pass on is part of the same chain that began millions of years ago on the African savanna. We are not remarkable simply because we inherited their genes. We are remarkable because we are still carrying their ideas. So perhaps we've been asking the wrong question all along. Instead of asking what the first humans looked like, maybe we should ask what the first idea was that made them human. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you had to choose one discovery that changed our species forever, what would it be? Share your answer in the comments below. Your perspective might add another piece to one of the greatest mysteries in human history. And if you enjoy exploring prehistoric mysteries through archaeology, anthropology, and scientific evidence, be sure to subscribe. There are still countless ancient mysteries waiting to be investigated together. So, what did the first humans really look like? After following the evidence, that question almost feels too small. Yes, they had heavier jaws, lower foreheads, and bodies that looked very different from our own. But none of those features explain why their descendants would one day build cities, cross oceans, walk on the moon, and begin searching for life beyond our own planet. The footprints revealed how they moved. The stone tools revealed how they solved problems. Together, those clues point to something far more remarkable than appearance. The first humans were not extraordinary because they looked different. They were extraordinary because they began looking at the world differently. They saw possibilities where every other animal saw only ordinary stones. They learned from one another. They passed knowledge from one generation to the next. And with every small discovery, they gave the future a better place to begin. Perhaps that was the first truly human act, not standing upright or making the first stone tool, but refusing to let knowledge disappear. Maybe that's the real reason we're here today. Every book you've ever read, every skill you've ever learned, every invention that has changed the world, and every idea someone has shared with you is part of the same chain that began millions of years ago with ancestors who never knew their discoveries would outlive them. So perhaps we've been asking the wrong question all along. Instead of asking what the first humans looked like, maybe we should be asking what the first idea was that made them truly human. And now we'd love to hear your thoughts. If one of our earliest ancestors could spend just one day in the modern world, what do you think would surprise them the most? Share your answer in the comments below. Some of the most fascinating ideas begin with conversations like these. And if you enjoy exploring humanity's greatest prehistoric mysteries through archaeology, anthropology, and scientific evidence, consider subscribing. There are still countless ancient mysteries waiting to be uncovered, and we'll continue investigating them together.